All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are very honored to be joined by our next guest, and I'm not sure if there is a better guest when it comes to connecting the Epstein emails to Pizzagate and everything else in between, and that is, of course, Liz Croken joining me now. First of all, Liz, I know you've been very busy doing the media circuit lately, and I salute you for that. I know it's not the funnest thing to have to go on show after show, including your own shows, and cover and talk about this stuff. But the thing that we have in common, and it's been the case for a decade now, is that this stuff matters to us. And you kind of, for somebody like me that's just so embedded in the political world, you just hit pause. You hit pause on the political news. You hit pause on, party politics and all this stuff. And you say, hey, hold on, look at what we're dealing with here. We're talking about innocent victims, children, sex slaves, trafficking, and God knows what else that we see in these emails. It's even hard to even comprehend some of it. But Liz, as we're getting these emails and texts and everything else that's coming out here this week, just for somebody with your background and the knowledge and the perspective and the context to connect it to the other stuff, what is it like for you to go through this and read this, having that background set of information and knowledge?
Right. So I've been exposing sex trafficking and these elite pedophile rings, specifically Pizzagate, since the Podesta emails came out in 2016. And I come with a background, at that point in time, I'd already been in mainstream media for over 2 decades. And I had a journalism degree. I got my first news job when I was 16 or 17 years old. And, I knew that pedophilia existed and I knew that sex trafficking existed. What I didn't know until 2016 is, number one, how widespread it was. And number two, the most powerful people in the world were involved in it, from, heads of state, government, politicians, members of Congress, Hollywood, from what we're learning now from the Epstein emails, like people in positions of power in every institution, every religion, anyone in a position of power, like they seem to have infiltrated absolutely everything. Now, when I started exposing Pizzagate in 2016, it became very clear to me very quickly that it wasn't just child sex trafficking and, the rape and torture of children. I learned that they were doing other really horrific, sick things, such as satanic rituals, satanic ritualistic abuse, child sacrifices, adrenochrome, cannibalism. Human hunting parties, like the list goes on. And that kind of stuff is really hard for anyone that's sane to digest. And so covering this topic that has been not only completely ignored by the mainstream media, but they've just been frantically denying it this whole time to this day, that's been really hard to cover. And it's something that's been very hard for the average person to believe at all. Nobody wants to believe this stuff is real. So covering it has been a complete and total nightmare because everyone thinks you're crazy. No one wants to believe it. They don't actually believe the crazy people that are doing this are crazy. They believe the messengers like me are crazy. However, fast forward to last Friday when these files were released, we saw those emails sent to Jeffrey Epstein and his associates, or sent by Jeffrey Epstein, prove that all of this stuff is real. And when I looked through John Podesta's emails in 2016, where they were using well-known pedophile code words such as pizza in a context that doesn't apply to food, and they were talking about torturing or torture rooms, and they were talking about children going to parties for entertainment, listing their ages, which all those emails were horrific, and it was very obvious they were trafficking kids from those emails. But then you take these emails that have been released and it proves that they're doing all of that stuff, but so much more. These emails, in my opinion, validate the darker stuff, like the Dr. Mengele kind of experiments, the satanic ritualistic abuse, the sacrifices, the murder, the cannibalism. And all you have to do is read the emails and listen to their words. And you can see that, yeah, this stuff is very real. These people are involved in all this horrific satanic stuff. And this completely and totally validates Pizzagate. Not only does it validate Pizzagate and that it's real, it proves it is way bigger than anyone knew. Even
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. And you know what's even crazier about it is it seems like there's two different networks operating. And I'm not even, I'm not even getting into the political partyism of it. I think that people
No.
that are getting into the political partyism of it are like trapped in a matrix
Mhm.
that they still need to escape. But it does seem to be like we've seen the code, like the code language with pizza and some other stuff that connect the WikiLeaks emails from
Mhm.
2016 to the Epstein emails from 2026. Like there's enough connecting of the dots with the language and the verbiage that they use, and then some of the art that has kind of popped up from the Podesta art to some of the EU art that's mentioned in some of the Epstein files. So it looks like there are connections with the two groups, but they do seem to be two totally different entities. They do seem to be two totally different entities, two totally different groups of people that are engaging in this same stuff, which I guess is not too far fetched. It's like, if you got a big city and you've got a big cocaine dealer over here and a big
Mhm.
cocaine dealer over here, everybody's going to go to their favorite dealer, whatever, have their own little
Yeah.
fiefdom of cocaine. Except we're talking about pedophiles and child sex abuse.
Yeah, I mean, so what I've learned by exposing elite pedophile rings over the years is that there's all kinds of different rings and they're everywhere. They're all over the world, unfortunately. And you will have rings that like local rings in different states where it'll be some kind of an elite ring where it'll be powerful people within that state. So you might have a police chief, you might have local politicians, you might have local police officers, um and so that there'll be like some smaller ring in pockets all over the country, but then you will have the bigger rings such as someone like Diddy or Jeffrey Epstein. But at the end of the day, all of these people connect. And when you look at Jeffrey Epstein and the people that were clearly involved in his ring, they do connect to the people involved in the Hillary Clinton John Podesta ring. And I would argue that that's the same ring. Those people were very close. I mean, we know the Clintons have been at Jeffrey Epstein's islands, like Bill over 25 times, Hillary at least 6 as of you know 2016. But more importantly, the Clinton Foundation was a front for child sex trafficking, which has been proven through official government records. And we know that both Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein were, according to them, not according to Liz Croken, according to them, were co-founders of the Clinton Foundation and working with the Clinton Foundation, which again was a front for child sex trafficking. So yeah, and in terms of the political stuff, what I would say is that I agree. Like this goes beyond political parties. It goes beyond everything, actually. Religion, like nationality. These people, what we should be calling this, we should be calling this the pedophile party. Okay. There's no more like Republican, Democrat. There is the pedophile party because you have people that claim to be Republicans, that claim to be Democrats that were involved in his pedophile ring. We saw Bush Sr., in the emails with the most horrific claims you could ever imagine. I don't know if you've talked about the Bush Sr. email or
Yeah,
from our
we've been reading the emails all week, every day.
yeah. So, that was talking about rape and trafficking that happened on a yacht party. And then it was talking about like babies being ripped apart and eaten. I mean, it's the most disgusting thing ever. But we also learned that this goes beyond political lines from the Podesta emails, because in the Podesta emails, we had Tony Podesta bragging about how he and I believe John too were good friends with former Speaker of the House, who also was a pedophile, Dennis Hastert, and he was Republican. And Tony was bragging about how he was still good pals with him, years after he'd been convicted of pedophilia crimes, right? So like these people are in a party, and it's not Republican or Democrat, it is the pedophile party.
And by the way, you talk about the Hastert one.
Mhm.
Some of this stuff is dated a little too far back to have like a digital archive, like an email or
Mhm.
such stuff. So it's easier to maybe claim, oh, I didn't know what he was doing, or I didn't communicate with him afterwards. The people that were communicating with Epstein after he was already convicted, they have no excuse.
No.
They can't deny it because we have their digital records, including members of this administration that claimed they quit talking to Epstein after he was convicted. And now, according to the emails, we find out that those are false claims because we see them communicating still.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw, but Deepak Chopra. So he prides himself on being some like spiritual guide or advisor, like, whatever. I mean, he came out and released a statement. I just saw it right before I came on with you. And, he's apologizing. He's claiming that he didn't commit any crimes. It's like, oh,
No.
you're this like supposed to be like this moral authority character. Like your whole brand is like, spirituality and peace and like all this bogus crap. And like, you literally emailed him years after he was arrested the first time, for trafficking and pedophilia crimes. Not only did you email him, you literally emailed him about cute girls. You didn't say women. You said girls. When you said girls, I'm thinking children. So like, these people that, tell us how to lead our lives, and they have this like spiritual, religious, moral authority. So many of them are involved and they're guilty. It's disgusting. And yeah, there's no excuse. After he was already arrested and exposed the first time, which, that whole case started in like, I think 2005 or 2006, and he was thrown in jail. He went to solitary confinement, and then he kind of got his sweetheart deal, whatever. I mean, even the media reported on that then. Everyone that's chosen to still hang out with him, party with him, email with him, go to the island, go to the dinners, even the media, there was that famous dinner with Katie Couric and like Chelsea Handler and like fellow pedophile Woody Allen, I believe, was at this dinner too. I mean, so many of these people hung out with him and, for years afterwards. So I'm actually glad that we have all those emails from after his first conviction, because it just shows you how sick and hypocritical these people are. None of these people are who they claim to be. They're all frauds. They're all evil. They're all disgusting. And they were all kissing Jeffrey Epstein's ass.
And I believe Allen and Couric have both had their names pop up in the emails.
Are you talking with who else did you say? Like Alan Dershowitz or
Woody Allen?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, he's all over there.
And Dershowitz, and Dershowitz too. But he's I was just his lawyer. Well, we'll see where the dust settles on all of this.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what. So, I will give him credit though, where most people just stay silent or they just deny everything. Like he actually has like at least addressed all the allegations that have been made against him. So, whereas most people just don't say anything, they just or whatever. So yeah, we'll see where that goes. But I find it very hard to believe he didn't know it. I mean, he was his lawyer, so it's very hard to believe.
He knew something. Yeah, he definitely knew something. Yeah. But the attorney-client privilege, as they say. For some context of some things you just said, there was a guy in Australia. The headlines were, I believe he was, I forget what his role in government was. He got busted in a satanic, in a satanic pedophile cult in Australia. And people were digging through some of the socials, and they found him constantly pictured with police chiefs. And it's like, yeah, that's how they get away with it. The Clinton testimony, they've been held in contempt of court. Mm-hmm. They should be in jail. The Clintons are said they're.
Hold on for 1 second before I forget this. You mentioned being photographed with police chiefs. So who else was photographed with police chiefs right after the Podesta emails came out? James Alefantis, who owns Comet Ping Pong in DC, and his entire Instagram page was littered with, pedophilia comments, children taped to tables, photos of infants for sale. I mean, just the most disgusting.
I'm going to play Ben Swann's original report that I guess is why he got fired. I know when you sign off, we're going to play that report. I know you talked to him yesterday.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And, I don't really want to get into it. You can feel free to get into it right now. But it's crazy what we went through in 2016 covering that stuff. Some of it got public. In Ben Swann's case, obviously, he wasn't on TV anymore. Some of it was kind of easy for the public to see. A lot of the stuff behind the scenes, you either couldn't talk about, didn't want to talk about, whatever. It was crazy what we went through in 2016 dealing with all of that. And then they eventually just swept it all under the rug. It's like, if you were there for Pizzagate, now we have all the double confirmations in the Epstein emails. It's like, if you were there for Pizzagate, we can't unsee what we saw. We know what we saw. Right. Some of us saw stuff even firsthand, not just through the internet and social media that they were, for whatever reason, willing to post on there. But we know what we saw.
Yeah. And so we've known about this for 10 years. And, we're getting harassed, threatened, intimidated nonstop for trying to expose it. And at the same time, we're being slandered and attacked by normies that only normies who only listen to the mainstream media that believe that we're nuts, the people that are, raping and eating kids aren't. And having to deal with that for a decade was a complete and total nightmare, but thank God all that stuff is actually finally coming out. And with Ben Swan, what they did to him was awful. And what's so crazy to me about his report is someone, again, that actually has been a journalist for a very long time, has a journalism degree, had a very successful journalism career. His report, I feel, was so fair. It was 100% accurate. And he just was simply like, he didn't really make a lot of accusations. He just asked basic, simple, reasonable questions. And for that, they destroyed his career. They put him on a leave of absence. They took down his social media. Like I was telling him last night, when I saw what they were doing to him, I genuinely thought that I thought he was dead. I thought they had killed him. So,
well, if I started posting stuff on social media with kids duct taped, or I started having art in my house with dead kids or chopped up kids, I think my friends and family might start asking some questions. I think that having people ask questions might be fair. Or let's say somebody comes over to do an interview and they say, well, golly gee, is that child torture art in your house right there? It's like, these are totally fair questions to ask. Now, a lot of people may not have seen that at the time. That's why when you sign off, we're going to play the original Ben Swan report. But, it's not even like, I don't feel, I mean, I guess there's some level of vindication here. I guess there's some level of validation. I didn't need it. I already had it at the time.
Yeah.
But it's not, I don't know how to quantify this. It's like, none of that matters to me until there are significant arrests and proof that we've put an end to this. None of it really matters to me until there's total proof that we're putting an end to this.
Right. I mean, it's nice that we have some backup. It takes some of the weight off of us. And it's nice that hopefully people now will be less likely to call us crazy. Hopefully the mainstream media will be less likely to, mock us and try to destroy our lives. But we actually put our necks out there because we actually have integrity and we care about children and we're horrified by this. Right. And so, being vindicated about the most horrible thing in the world that nobody wants to be true, it's really hard to really be like, it's a hard thing to celebrate because it's like, well, this is still happening. These people have been brought to justice. So it's a weird thing.
Yeah, show me the kids that you rescued, right? Like, show us all the children that you rescued, or I mean, God forbid, the corpses of them.
Yeah, I think that there's probably so many more victims of Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirators and clients than we could even imagine. I think for sure hundreds, probably thousands, and I believe probably most of them are dead. And now reading the latest dump, the way that they were talking about some of the victims dying, or, how they were talking about offing people, murdering people. Like, I mean, they talk about murdering people just like you and I would talk about, like, hey, do you want to go grab a drink after this podcast? Like that. It's just like a normal thing that they make it seem like it's a normal thing that they just do like literally every day. So, but they're psychopaths.
And maybe they do. Again, like somebody that likes cocaine, they snort a lot of cocaine. Somebody that abuses children, they probably abuse a lot of children. And by the way, and I don't know if you monitor this like I do, this is part of my daily routine, but I got my side screen over here. It kind of gets cut off with this shot. I got my side screen over here. I monitor the mainstream news pretty much every waking hour. I've seen maybe 30 minutes of coverage in the cable news networks. I did see there was an ABC news piece. ABC actually did a piece on this, like an actual presentation piece on this. I think it was about 5 minutes of a package. But I've seen maybe 30, an hour max, maybe combined since Monday of coverage of this. I've covered it every day. Even on one single day, I will just spend an hour just reading the emails. So to me, they're covering this up. There's no other way to put this. The cable news networks, the mainstream news networks are covering this up. They won't even read these emails on the air. They just kind of give it a little contextual stuff, and then they decide how they want to politicize it, whether it's against Trump or whether it's against Clinton or whether it's against the Democrats, whatever. I mean, to me, the mainstream media cover up is an angle that, it's hard to focus on that because we're talking about them slicing up pizza for your enjoyment. But no, the mainstream media is covering this up. Do you think that's, I don't think all the people in the mainstream media are evil necessarily. I do think they sell their soul to a bit. I do think they sell their soul for that big dollar contract. And then they get to that point and it's just, hey, I'm just here to do a job, right? I'm just here to do whatever news they tell me to do. So they sell their soul a little bit. I don't think they're necessarily evil, but then I have to ask myself, how are you not presenting this stuff to your audience? How are you not showing your audience this stuff?
Yeah, because they're all owned and controlled by the same people who are tied to Jeffrey Epstein. So, people within the mainstream media, not all of them are bad, but, I've been talking to people in the mainstream media. I used to be a part of it. And I got fired from multiple jobs for exposing this stuff, but a lot of them would just tell me that you were not allowed to talk about it. We'd lose our jobs. And so, we know it's real, but, we're not allowed to talk about it. And then, and people don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to get canceled. And it's a real problem. The mainstream media is treating this very similarly to how they treated Pizzagate in 2016 and the Podesta emails. Chris Cuomo told people that it's illegal to read the Podesta emails, which was a lie. And they all said it was a debunked conspiracy theory, but no one explained how it was debunked, so it was never debunked. So they just blatantly lied about it, and then they would come after people like you and I, Alex Jones, and just attack us relentlessly and call us crazy. Like they wouldn't even acknowledge that I was a journalist. And I had a whole journalism career before I started covering this. They would call me like a self-described journalist or self-proclaimed journalist. And, they just erased like my whole history. But what is interesting with the trends in the mainstream media today with this new dump, there is a difference I've noticed because I track the mainstream media too. When Pizzagate came out, they launched a full-scale attack against anyone that was telling the truth about Pizzagate. And they launched a whole PSYOP to redefine what Pizzagate is, number one. And then they also basically said that, it's all fake. It's not true. So now we have like the extended version of Pizzagate with the latest Jeffrey Epstein Files. And they're not attacking people like you and I. They're not mentioning Pizzagate. They haven't created the PSYOP at least yet. They're just ignoring it completely. And I have noticed that they've been ignoring Pizzagate or anything that validates Pizzagate over the past like 2-3 years. Whereas before, like I would do a video or, I would write a story, and then they would just try to debunk it without debunking it and just say I'm crazy. So it is an interesting shift because they're taking a different approach where they're just kind of like acting like this isn't happening. They're not like singling me out, you out, anyone that's covering it. And I think that they're choosing this strategy because it's gotten too big now. There's too many people covering pizza. What are they going to do? Write a hit piece on like thousands of influencers and, independent journalists talking about it?
I do think about that though, Liz.
Mm-hmm.
I do think about how they're going to strike back. They always do. I don't know if it'll be, like you said, kind of what we've endured in the past. They always find a way of striking back. I do think about that. And by the way, for a little more context here, and think whatever you want about Megyn Kelly. She's talking about this now. Megyn Kelly's talking about it now.
When is was she talking about today? Because I haven't heard.
Well, I'm not saying she's going all in, but I mean, I think that she'll cover whatever is kind of trending. But it's funny that I kind of watch this evolution of Megyn Kelly now, and trying to kind of go maybe more of a Tucker Carlson.
She does seem more independent now. I mean,
he is definitely more independent, but here's why I bring it up. She did come to InfoWars to do a hit piece on Alex Jones back when I was working there. I believe that was 2016 or something.
I remember that.
And that was in the midst of Pizzagate. That was in the midst of Seth Rich. And in the beginning of that piece, because I was part of that piece, she interviewed me. Now she cut all of my Seth Rich Pizzagate stuff out. But in the intro, she basically is calling us all kooks. She's basically calling us all kooks. We're all crazies because we believe this stuff. But now it's like, yeah, Megyn would probably admit that this stuff is relatively real. And, I'm not expecting an apology or anything like that. But I think it kind of lends to the bigger picture now that it's like, yeah, this is so big that the people that used to call us crazy and cast us off as, conspiracy theorists or whatever, now they realize, okay, either I cover this or I'm going to be the one that looks like the bad guy. It's like the roles have kind of reversed.
Absolutely. And you look at everyone that went to the White House and got the binders. I mean, okay, you guys all did a little photo op. We're so cute. We got like Epstein binders that basically had no new information on Epstein, and everyone like
They
thought
were all old. It was all old information. It was like years
it
old.
was stuff that you and I have been reporting for the past decade, and they're all like, "Oh, it's so cool," but we're gonna go on Fox and like push out our propaganda talking points. So many of them have stayed just completely silent about like all this stuff. But like, here's the thing: everyone's calling them out. My whole feed is just people like making fun of them, calling them out, like you're frauds. Like, this is the biggest story of our lifetimes. Period. Like,
Yeah.
the entire world is run by satanic pedophiles. Like, period. And like the latest dump 100% confirmed that. And just like biggest story ever. And so many of them are just like, oh, the Democrats are doing this or
Yeah,
Congress.
exactly. They're blaming it on Russia, Liz. I got Pete. They're saying, "Oh, Russia."
Oh, that's such a good one.
Oh, I know. It's hilarious. It's Russia again. Here we go. Meanwhile, I mean, Putin is like the number one world leader. And I'm not saying whatever you think about his politics or him, I'm not whatever. I'm saying Putin does interviews and he says the world is run by satanic, but like he says it in interviews. He's like, yeah, there's a bunch of satanic pedophiles that run the planet. There's a bunch of evil demons running the planet. Putin does say that. I mean, he does.
He's been saying it for over a decade now. And actually the reason I got red pilled on President Putin is because when I started exposing sex trafficking and Pizzagate in 2016, 2017, the whole mainstream media like lied about it. And many of them were just like blatantly attacking me, writing hit pieces on me. And then I noticed that there were a few places that actually would tell the truth about my reporting. And it was Russia State. It was Russia State's media. And I'm like, what? So I'm like, wait, I worked in the mainstream media in the United States and they're all lying about me and my reporting, but like Russia's telling the truth. Like, what's happening here? So then I went down the rabbit hole. I'm like, wait, what's going on with Russia and like President Putin? And that's when I found some of his speeches where he was speaking out against pedophilia and Satanism. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And that's when I realized he's not the boogeyman that the media has portrayed him to be, just like, President Donald Trump never was. And that's when I realized, oh, now I know why he's the scapegoat, why they're attacking him, because he's against this. He's not one of them. He's not a Satanist. He's not a pedophile. And if you actually really look into him, you can see that like he actually banned adoptions. Like he banned, I think, the United States from Russians from like adopting, or Russians allowing their kids to be adopted to people in the United States. There's a lot of things that he's done that our media has not talked about to combat child sex trafficking and pedophilia. I mean, they won't even show a clip of him or quote him ever. If you read any article on Putin in the United States, like they never quote him. So what you have to do is you have to go to Russian media and that's translates what his speeches and whatnot to find out like what he actually says. It's crazy.
And maybe one of the best examples of this recently, and I don't know how much you've dug into this, but they would make these claims that Putin was kidnapping children from Ukraine, when the reality was Putin was taking the children out of the sex trafficking networks that were in Ukraine. That's what was going on. So the Russians went in there. They found some of these sex trafficking networks. They found some of the biolabs, whatever. And I think that's a lot of the reason why the West was panicked over Russia moving in there. Whatever you think about it, I think that's what some of the panic was, and that's why they kept funding Ukraine to try to hold the Russians off as long as possible, so they could get all of their resources out of there, the biolabs, the sex trafficking resources, all of it. But that was a big spin. They said, "Oh, look, Putin is kidnapping the children." No, they were discovering all the sex slaves. They were releasing the sex slaves.
Yeah, and so they always distort it. They always invert it. And so what they were doing is they were accusing him of what they're guilty of. And Ukraine has been a hotspot for child sex trafficking for a very long time. And then we learned from Epstein's emails that they were very interested in Ukraine. They were very interested in just taking down the entire government. And what does that do when you take down a government when there's war in a country? Well, it displaces families. And that's a perfect way to kidnap children and traffic them. Like, why do you think the Clintons loved Haiti so much? Why do you think they love natural disasters so much? Because they go in and
Laura Silsby, folks, look up the name Laura Silsby if you want to find out about the Clintons in Haiti.
Now her name's Laura Silsby Gaylor because she got married.
Doesn't she runs the Amber Alert now too, doesn't she?
Yeah, so she ran Alert Sense, which is part of Amber Alert. So she was she was she was charged, I believe, convicted of trying to traffic 33 children. Of course, 33. They love that number. 33 children out of Haiti, and then the Clintons came in to her rescue, and they managed to get her released. And then they brought her into a government job where she was in charge of finding missing children. So, and then
Yeah,
by
what
the
are
way,
the odds?
it was her lawyer, and I believe her lawyer's spouse were also arrested for trafficking children, I believe in Central America as well. Like, these people are all involved in it.
Yeah,
It's,
it really is crazy. And, a couple other things that came up in this were, Wayfair Gate. Back a couple years ago, when people noticed that there were some oddly priced, way overpriced stuff on Wayfair that just so happened, by coincidence, I'm sure, that just so happened to also have the names of missing children in them. I've got a couple examples of this that I'll put on the screen for people that weren't aware of that. So, okay, that kind of came and went, whatever. People covered it at the time. It came and went. Then we saw some Wayfair receipts inside of the Epstein files. And so that kind of brought that connection back up. So it's just like, it's amazing. You had the frazzle drip, you got all of this stuff over the years. And it's just like, so much of it gets kind of connected to these Epstein files, which are government documents. Nobody's, it's not like you can just say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. These are government documents. So it's like, how are you going to deny that?
Yeah. And so Wayfair was 100% true. And I have a theory about Wayfair and other e-commerce sites. So what they basically were doing, what you said, they would have an item like a sock for sale for $10,000, or like a crappy nightstand made out of like cardboard for $15,000, and then the item would be labeled the name of a missing child, and the names of the children. Some of the names were like crazy names, like
anybody
names
can use that, right? It's not like it's just a site anybody can go post on, right?
Yes, but it wasn't just that site. I noticed it on Walmart. Walmart.
I saw a couple other of them pop up. I'm not too familiar with how those e-commerce sites work because I don't sell anything on those sites, but it's basically like anybody can get access to them and you can sell whatever you want.
Yeah. I mean, some of them vary differently, but what happened during President Trump's first term is they shut down Backpage, which I believe was one of the mainstream channels that they used, and which was operating over 100 countries, or about 100, to traffic children. So when they took down Backpage, they had to move to other locations. And so that's why I think we started seeing this like pop up on Wayfair and other e-commerce sites. And what's so crazy about Wayfair is they did the same thing with Wayfair that they did with PizzaGate. They basically just said, oh no, like this isn't real. We're not trafficking children. And then they offered no explanation as to like why things that cost like $50 maybe is being listed for $5,000, and then missing children's names match up with these items. They just basically said, no, this isn't real. Like, there's nothing to see here. Move along, like carry along. And they didn't really address it. And then the other thing that was really interesting is that when President Joe Biden became president, 1 year I think it was the Department of State issued their trafficking and persons report, and they had a whole section warning people about conspiracy theories. And they basically said that there's no elite pedophile rings involving the government, politicians, and celebrities, which basically is the definition of Pizzagate. And then they also said that nobody is trafficking children on any furniture websites. Those were the two things that they zeroed in on, Pizzagate and Wayfair, basically. And they said, this isn't real. So don't believe anything you read claiming that any of this exists. And this is when like Diddy was getting exposed and like those people were starting to go down. So it was just, so that's how you know it's real, because they go so out of their way to say this isn't real, but then they cannot prove that it's not real, or they can't debunk it. So, the Wayfair and these other e-commerce sites, like all of that should be revisited, because obviously there's truth in that.
I want to go back to the beginning here, and you kind of got into some of your background. Our backgrounds are somewhat similar as far as, coming up in the professional world, training, college, and all that. I went into the sports media, eventually switched to politics, but the whole reason why I switched was I had, the light click on one day when I realized that the mainstream media was lying to us. It was like, it was such a revelation to me. I couldn't even believe it. And so naturally I felt I had to go into news. I had to go into politics, current events, because I saw that the mainstream media was filled with lies and propaganda. So it's like, okay, this is what I want to do now. And so when Pizzagate happened, it's like, I feel like most people who are still in touch with their humanity, their soul, they want to be a good person. They look at the world and they say something has gone wrong. Something has gone horribly wrong. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Something is wrong with civilization. It's like, yeah, we got some fancy gadgets and we have some fun things we can do and it's fun and it's easy to get distracted. But it's like when you strip it all away, there's still something there. Like this is something evil is afoot. Something evil is running around and I can't quite, understand it or get grips on it, but it's like, I can comprehend it. I can feel it. I can see it's there. And so when Pizzagate happened, it was like, it no longer really became this mystery. It became something that we could finally kind of, clench our teeth onto. So it'd be like, the comparison I guess I make here, the analogy is, it's like if there's a dog who is wondering where the car is going, and this dog is just obsessed, like, where is this car going? It's always leaving, it's always going, but he can't catch it. And then one day the dog finally catches the car and grips its teeth onto it and gets to see where it's going. And it's like, that's what it felt like to me. It's like, oh, finally, we've got our jaw clenched to the bumper of this car. We get to see where it goes. And it went really exactly, maybe not exactly, but it went a lot of the same directions we thought it would be going. And it's just like, once you see that, there's no going back. Once people see these Epstein files, there's no going back. What was it kind of a similar thing with you, with Pizzagate? How did you end up in this world? Because that's what it was like for me. It was like, oh, I know something isn't right. I know it. And then that was my first awakening was, wow, the mainstream media lies and propagandizes us. And then the second one with Pizzagate, that was like, oh, we've got our teeth, we've got our jaw on this thing now. Let's see where it goes.
When I was working in media in 2016, I knew the media was corrupt, but I didn't know how corrupt it was. And so, with my experience, I just was like, okay, places like CNN and MSNBC, they're more liberal, they're leftist, like they're fake news. I knew that. I honestly thought that Fox News was fair and pretty accurate, like in 2016 before the Podesta emails came out. And I worked for Bill O'Reilly. I interned for him. Bill was exposing pedophilia in the 90s, and he also was exposing all kinds of Clinton crimes and corruption. And so and maybe I was very naive, but with my history, when I first got into news, I think it was my first job was in 1997. And then I fast forward to a few years later, my first official paid news job that was an internship was with the Chicago Tribune City Newswire. And a lot of the most famous journalists started at the City News Bureau at the Chicago Tribune. And they look at it as almost like a not just a job, but like hard knocks journalism training school. And the joke there is if your mom says she loves you, back it up with 5 sources. And they were so tough. You had to back everything up with 5 sources. You couldn't get one little thing wrong. The editors were crazy, but it was great training and great education. But that was the mentality there back then. And then fast forward to 2016, I'm still thinking that there's some honest media out there like Fox News. And when the Podesta emails came out, I kept thinking, oh my gosh, here's the proof that the Clintons are not just evil and involved in all kinds of crimes. They're actually involved in human trafficking as well. And I kept thinking, oh, someone at Fox has got to cover this any day now. And then it never happened. And then I watched them cover it up. And I was like, oh. And I had no idea that the entire mainstream media was all controlled. But what happened from when I first started in media in 1997 to 2016 is that, and Mike Smith talked about this in Outer Shadows, is, back in the 80s and 90s, all the newspapers and the local TV stations, up to the cable news, they were owned by probably over 50 different companies. Now I believe it's less than 5 major corporations own everything, from the cable news to newspapers down to the local, TV stations, in the middle of Iowa. And so everything is being syndicated from the same people at the top. And those people are all controlled by the same people who are aligned with Epstein and his associates. And so, of course, they're told that they're not allowed to cover this. And that's why they don't touch it. But I didn't realize that until 2016 and 2017. And I just saw how everyone was either lying about this or not talking about it at all, or just actively covering it up. And that was almost as rude of awakening as learning the truth about the child sex trafficking was. Because when I learned the truth about the child sex trafficking, I was like, there's got to be at least one person in media that's willing to tell the truth about it. And I guess it was just Ben Swan. And then, like I would consider you guys were alternative media. You weren't mainstream media, right? And then I was like, oh my God, what? Like, no, they don't exist anymore. Like real journalists in mainstream media, they don't exist anymore. And that was so depressing to me, because I actually love journalism. I believe in the truth. That's why I became a journalist, and when I was covering PizzaGate from the beginning, I wasn't thinking, oh, they're going to try to kill me, or I might lose my followers, or I might get canceled, or I might get fired. I was thinking this is the biggest story ever, and they're hurting children. Like this needs to be covered. And I guess no one else in mainstream media thinks that way anymore. And it's very sad.
That's the big awakening. It's when it's like, oh yeah, well, if it was real, they would cover it. And then you learn it's real and they don't cover it. And you're like, oh, okay. I was totally wrong. By the way, I think one great example from recently, I'm sure you've heard of Ivory Hecker. She kind of talked about her journey through the mainstream media. She's gone independent now, and what she dealt with. So let me ask you this in closing, Liz, and we appreciate your time today. Yeah. Liz Croken, our guest. Follow her on X at Liz Croken. We've been popping up her X page there on the screen for you. Where do you go from here? Because, I kind of landed on the conclusion where this week I'm just going to read the emails. I'm just going to read the documents, let people consume them. They can see them for themselves. We'll do a little commentary, a little opinion, try to apply whatever pressure I can, I guess, to the administration. They tell me to shut the F up, literally. But just try to apply whatever pressure we have left to the administration to get some action. It seems like they've already made up their minds. I kind of said, what, as far as the independent media and the other voices out there, I'm going to wait. I'm going to give them a grace period. I'm going to wait and see what happens in this week and where things go. Because I do understand how tough this is for people. And there's a lot at stake. I do understand that. So I'm a little patient, maybe playing a little nice guy. So I've decided, okay, just give the emails to the audience, apply the pressure to the administration where we can, and then I'll kind of reset next week and see where we want to go with this show. But that's been my approach. What about you, Liz? Where does Liz Croken go from here? What do you think about as far as where we go from here after these emails and the response to it?
Well, I think the story is only going to get bigger and bigger. The cat's out of the bag. Like there's no putting the worms back in the can at this point. Too many people are awake. Too many people are covering it. And now that we know that all these horrific things are true, all this evil is true and it's happening, these people are committing all these crimes against children, we can't let them get away with it. So, I understand why there's criticism of the administration. I understand why there's a lot of questions for the administration right now. There's a lot of people that think that nothing's going to be done, that they've been apathetic and they're not going to do anything. There's not going to be arrests. And actually, I think it's not a bad thing that people think that. We're supposed to criticize the people in positions of power. We're supposed to be questioning our leaders. We're supposed to be questioning the people that we elected into the office, including President Trump. I'm a huge supporter of President Trump. But with that being said, we should be questioning him and his administration, and we should be applying pressure on them. Okay, now we know the truth. It's not a conspiracy theory. They are committing these crimes. Justice needs to happen. We cannot live in a society where people are allowed to rape, torture, traffic, and eat children, and they get away with it. These people are vampires. We cannot coexist with them. We can't. So justice has to happen, and whatever it takes. And I think it's going to take more people getting outraged, mobilizing, signing petitions. Maybe we need to start protesting. Like maybe we need to be filing civil lawsuits, if the government is going to be apathetic, or if they're not going to pursue criminal charges against these people. I don't have all the answers, but one thing I know for sure is that these people can't get away with this stuff. And as more people wake up, here's the thing. The good news is that there's more of us than them. Mm-hmm. There's more of us than them, and they do fear us, the pedophiles. If they just let this go, and I say they, the people in positions of authority, the good guys, so the the DOJ, the FBI, like anyone good that might be left at like the CIA, and then we have video of the military and we have ICE. If they just let this go, and because what are they doing right now? ICE is arresting, pedophiles, illegal alien pedophiles and sex traffickers that have come here illegally from other countries. So we're gonna arrest them, but the elites are allowed to do this? Like, no, I don't think so. If they don't take action against these elites, like I do think at some point, like people will start taking matters in their own hands, and that won't be good either. So one way or the other, like justice has to happen. And I can tell you one thing, like I'm not going to stop fighting or shut up until that happens.
Yeah, and I would even say part of the reason why Mayorkas opened the border was so that they could get as many young children in as possible. And
Absolutely.
Yeah,
they reversed, President Trump had signed so many executive orders and he did so many things to stop the trafficking with migrant children. And President Biden's administration reversed all that stuff strategically so they could traffic children.
They got rid of the DNA test. I mean, I don't know if it gets any worse and obvious than that. That was the obvious thing of, hey, we're bringing in young children to put into the sex trafficking rings, and we're going to do it under Biden, and we're going to just open it wide open, and you're not going to stop us. And so Trump has luckily shut the border down, so they're not getting any new, at least it's been way lower as far as that's concerned, but they're not getting any new product in, let's say, to unfortunately sound very cold-hearted about it, but that's what it is. That's how they view it. That's what they did under Biden, and they're shutting it down. So that's the good news.
But again, so they're arresting. So ICE is going out and they're arresting these lower level traffickers, who, by the way, many of them do, in my opinion, supply kids to the elites. So is this going to be a two-tier like justice systems for the pedophiles, like the ones that are best friends with Jeffrey Epstein and went to the island, like they're allowed to get away with trafficking kids and raping kids and eating kids or doing satanic rituals on kids. But the MS-13 members, the CJNG cartel members, and the legal aliens aren't. No, you heard a child, you heard a child. I don't care if you're a billionaire or if you have $1 to your name, like end of story. And so, we'll see what happens, but they all have to be held to account.
Yeah. That's a great point right there. I love that way to end it. If you're on the right and you want to see the illegal alien pedophiles and sex traffickers arrested, you better bring that same energy to what we found out with Pizzagate and the Epstein emails. Excellent way to end the interview. Liz Croken, always an honor, always a pleasure. Follow her on X at Liz Croken right there on the screen. And you've really been you've been pounding the digital pavement since all this stuff came out. I'm enjoying your content, so appreciate you taking time for us today. And
congrats on the new show.
Thank you very much. We really we enjoy the independent Owen Schroyer a lot.
I'm sure Alex misses you so much, though.
I don't know about that.
Is he still mad at you? It's okay. And I'm not mad at you. You leave 2 seconds later. Oh, Tim, F you, Owen. So
Liz Croken, everybody. Always on fire. God bless you, Liz. Thank you.